In 1994, a young couple vanished from a quiet lakeside cabin. No note, no struggle, just gone. Their guestbook entry was cheerful. Their bags were packed, but no one ever saw them again. 29 years later, someone else finds their names in the guestbook, dated 2 weeks ago. This is the story of the rental guestbook, and what happens when you start digging into a past someone desperately wants forgotten. Don't forget to subscribe for new investigative stories every day. August 10th, 1994. Location: Stillwater Lake, Maine. Waterside rental number 6. The sound of cicadas hummed through the thick August air, drifting lazily across the still waters of Stillwater Lake. The sun had just started to dip below the tree line, casting long shadows that stretched across the dock. The lake was glassy, untouched by wind or wave. A loon called in the distance, a lonely, echoing sound that cut the silence like a thread. Rental cabin number 6 was modest, tucked among tall pines on a gravel road that wound around the eastern edge of the lake. The front porch faced the water, with 2 faded Adirondack chairs and an old hanging swing that creaked when the wind passed through. The cabin had been rented for a long weekend by Michael and Laura Emmett, a couple from Boston celebrating their 3rd anniversary. They never checked out. Inside, the air was stale but not unpleasant. It smelled of cedar and lake water, sunscreen, and old books. The couple's belongings were neatly arranged. A half-packed suitcase sat open on the bed. A bottle of red wine stood uncorked on the kitchen counter, its companion glass only half drained. Nothing was broken. Nothing was out of place, except the silence. On the dining table rested the cabin's guestbook, a leather-bound journal with thick, creamy pages and looping handwritten notes dating back years. A small placard read, "Please tell us about your stay." Most entries were cheerful, short notes about the sunsets, the loons, the fireflies. But the last message, dated August 10th, 1994, was different. "The water is calm tonight. Almost too calm. We're not alone here. M&L Emmett." The caretaker, Len Walters, found the cabin empty on the morning of August 11th. He was used to renters forgetting things: chargers, beach towels, paperback novels. But this was different. Their car was gone. Their phones rang endlessly back home. Police were called. A search began. The shoreline was combed, docks inspected. A diving team scanned the lake bed. Helicopters hovered over dense tree lines, but no sign of Laura or Michael was ever found. Not a piece of clothing, not a shoe, not a body, nothing. The Emmets became a local legend. The vanished couple of cabin 6. Theories ranged from drowning to staged escape to something darker, unspoken. Eventually, the case went cold. Their file joined the shelf of the missing, sealed in a manila folder and stored with others who'd slipped quietly out of the world. The guestbook stayed. No one thought to remove it. Renters continued writing in it. The handwriting changed, years passed, but no one ever mentioned the Emmets again. Until 29 years later. July 3rd, 2023. Location: Stillwater Lake, Maine. Waterside rental number 6. The air smelled like wet pine and memory. Claire Rain stepped out of her Subaru Forester and stretched her stiff legs, taking in the shoreline of Stillwater Lake. It had been a 6-hour drive from Brooklyn, half of it through congested city traffic, the other half on winding New England roads that hugged hillsides and past crumbling barns. Now, the city felt like another universe. Here, the loudest sound was the water gently brushing against the dock. Claire was 34, quiet and observant. Her voice had the kind of calm authority that made people lean in. That voice was also the reason her true crime podcast, Echo Lake, had built a loyal, if niche, following, just enough to pay the rent and keep her afloat between freelance gigs. She specialized in cold cases, the ones people had forgotten, or tried to. Stillwater Lake wasn't exactly famous, But it had caught her attention last month while researching unsolved disappearances in Maine. An archived police note mentioned a couple, Michael and Laura Emmett, who vanished in August 1994 from a lake rental. No confirmed sighting, no remains, no resolution. The case had been buried under bigger headlines, but something about it stuck with Claire. So here she was. She checked her phone, no signal. That was expected. The Airbnb listing had warned her about the spotty reception. A few bars came and went near the porch, but mostly she'd have to drive 10 minutes into town if she needed a connection. The rental cabin looked like a postcard. Aged wood, white trim, ivy curling around the porch railing. A rusted bell hung beside the front door. The lake glittered just behind it, framed by tall evergreens and a cloudless sky. Idyllic. But even as she approached, Claire felt a strange pressure in her chest. The kind you get just before a storm rolls in. She unlocked the door. The air inside was cool and dry. A ceiling fan ticked overhead. A small kitchen opened to a main room with a threadbare couch, a dining table, and an old record player on a sideboard. The walls were lined with shelves holding worn paperbacks and local wildlife guides. Claire dropped her duffel bag near the couch and wandered into the bedroom. One full-sized bed, a handmade quilt, a narrow dresser. The bathroom smelled of lemon cleaner and cedar. She pulled out her voice recorder from her backpack and clicked it on. Echo Lake, Season 3, Episode 1. Recording date, July 3, 2023. Location, Stillwater Lake, Maine. Case file, Michael and Laura Emmett. Missing since August 10, 1994. Arrived at the property around 4:15 p.m. Temperature is 78 degrees. Sky is clear. Cabin appears structurally unchanged since 1994. Porch, dock, shoreline, all match original police photos. Interior clean, quiet, feels still. She stopped recording. Something about the word still felt too close to home. She shook it off. Her plan was simple. Stay for 1 week, record, research, interview the old caretaker if he was still alive. Walk the shoreline, get a feel for the space. Maybe something would click. With cold cases, Claire believed in the power of atmosphere. Being where it happened changed how you saw things. She unpacked, set up her laptop and recording gear, then lit a citronella candle on the porch and opened a fresh notebook. The sunset came fast. The lake turned gold, then orange, then almost black. The cicadas returned. A loon called from the far shore. Claire found herself staring at the water for long minutes, hypnotized. She barely noticed the time until her watch buzzed. 9:30 p.m. Back inside, she made tea and poked through the small bookshelf in the main room. Dog-eared novels, cookbooks, a 1987 field guide to Maine birds. And then, on the lowest shelf, almost forgotten, she saw it. A leather-bound guestbook. Her breath caught. She reached for it slowly, as if it might resist. The cover was soft with age, the edges worn. She opened the first few pages. Entries dated back to the 1970s. Couples, families, solo travelers. They'd written about campfires, wildlife sightings, rainstorms, birthdays. She flipped forward. More of the same. Dozens of pages filled with cursive handwriting and ink doodles. Little drawings of fish or sunrises. She smiled. There was something comforting about the continuity of it all. Then she turned to the final third of the book, and her heart stopped. August 10th, 1994. The water is calm tonight, almost too calm. We're not alone here. M and L Emmett. Claire sat frozen. Her eyes scanned the name again. The date. The message. She ran her fingers down the page. The ink hadn't faded. It looked recent. No smudges, no yellowing. The page directly before it was dated July 28th, 1994. The next entry, after a several-page gap, was from May 1996, 2 years later. She flipped back again. No mention of the Emmets after that. No one wrote anything about a missing couple. No renters left notes of concern. It was as if no one noticed or cared. She stood abruptly and walked to the kitchen, the guest book still in hand, the wine bottle and half glass from the police file. Those had been removed. There were no signs of anything abnormal here. But she knew. They had disappeared. Here, in this room. She returned to her recorder and clicked it on. 9:52 p.m. just discovered a guestbook entry dated August 10th, 1994. Signed by Michael and Laura Emmett. The message reads, "The water is calm tonight, almost too calm. We're not alone here." This confirms they were present at the cabin the night they vanished. The ink appears fresh. Entry is positioned between typical vacation notes. No indication that subsequent renters acknowledged the disappearance. She turned off the recorder. Outside, the wind picked up. The swing on the porch creaked once. Claire looked out the front window. The lake shimmered in the moonlight, almost silver now, beautiful, deceptive. She went to bed late, mind spinning. That night, she dreamed of water rushing up the porch stairs, flooding the cabin in slow motion. In the dream, she stood waist-deep inside, holding the guest book above her head, as everything else around her floated or sank. She woke up sweating at 2:48 a.m. Somewhere outside, something splashed. She froze, then heard it again. Not the gentle lapping of waves. This was sharper, closer. A sound like someone slipping into the water. She moved to the window. Her breath fogged the glass. She waited. Nothing. Just the still surface of the lake, the dark outline of the dock, and the moon casting its pale light. Eventually, she went back to bed. But sleep never really returned. July 4th, 2023. Location, Stillwater Lake, Maine. Dockside and town. Archive morning came quietly. Stillwater Lake looked painted in pale gray and gold. The sun crept over the pines, casting long shadows across the dock. Claire sat on the porch with a thermos of coffee, the guest book in her lap. She'd barely slept, and when she had, the dreams kept looping. Water, the guest book, a voice calling from under the dock. She hadn't imagined the splash last night, but she couldn't prove it either. Now, in daylight, everything seemed benign again. The lake shimmered. Birds chirped. A deer paused at the edge of the woods before vanishing into the trees. But that feeling remained. That pressure behind her ribs, like something was off-kilter. She opened the guest book again. The Emmett entry was still there, identical to how she remembered it. The water is calm tonight. Almost too calm. We're not alone here. Who writes something like that? Claire knew the tone of these guest books. Light, jokey, occasionally sentimental. Not ominous. She ran her fingers along the page. The ink wasn't smudged. Was it ballpoint? Gel? It was hard to tell. She scanned earlier pages, noting how the pen pressure changed with each author. Some pages had faded to near illegibility. Others remained pristine. She flipped back to the Emmett entry. Something caught her eye. The date, August 10th, 1994, wasn't written in the same ink as the message below it. Subtle. Slight difference in stroke and flow. The signature, too, M and L Emmett, looked heavier. Ink that bled slightly more into the paper. Claire stared, heart beginning to pound. Had someone added the date and names after the message? Why? She grabbed her notebook and scribbled observations. She'd need to photograph it later, maybe get it to a handwriting expert. But first, she needed context. Who managed the property back then? Who kept this guest book? And why was it never mentioned in the official reports? By 10 a.m., she was driving into town. That afternoon, Claire walked the shoreline trail toward the far side of the lake. The air was heavy with pine and mosquitoes. Her hiking boots crunched along narrow paths. Twice she thought she heard movement deeper in the woods, twigs snapping. But when she stopped to listen, the silence returned. It took nearly an hour, but eventually she saw smoke curling above the trees, fireplace smoke, faint but steady. She followed the trail until it opened onto a clearing. A small cabin stood there, leaning slightly, weather-beaten. A dog barked once from the porch. Then a voice, "Who's out there?" Claire stepped forward. "Mr. Walters?" The door creaked open. A tall, gaunt man with thinning gray hair emerged. He held a mug in one hand and a cane in the other. He squinted at her. "Do I know you?" She introduced herself, mentioned the Emmets, the Guestbook. Walter's eyes didn't change, but his shoulders tightened. "I'm not doing interviews." "I think you already did one," Claire said carefully. "In 1994, you showed George Little the Guestbook." Now he looked annoyed. "That was a long time ago. You told him you'd take it to the police." "I did." "No, you didn't." A long pause. "I didn't think it mattered. They were gone. I figured the entry was just something weird they wrote. They mentioned not being alone. Something about the water being too calm." Walters didn't respond. "I think you've seen something," Claire said quietly. "And I think that's why you never handed over the book." He turned and walked slowly back inside. Claire stood still. Just as she turned to leave, his voice called out from behind the screen door. "I heard something that night," he said. She stopped. "Late, after midnight. I thought it was a coyote or something. Then I saw movement on the lake, lights, like lanterns, out near the cove." Claire's heart thudded. "Anyone else see them?" No one else was up, but the next day they were gone, just gone. He stepped fully into view again. And that's not the first time something like that happened. Claire felt goosebumps crawl up her arms. "People vanish?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said, "but only from cabin 6. Back at her rental that night, Claire sat on the dock long after sunset. The water reflected the moon perfectly. The wind was still. She held the Guestbook in her lap again. Her flashlight rested beside her. She turned to the back of the book. One page was blank, and then, below it, in fresh ink, a message had appeared she swore hadn't been there before. "You shouldn't have come back." Her breath stopped. Then she realized it wasn't the same handwriting as the Emmett entry. It was different. July 5th, 2023. Location, Stillwater Lake, Maine. The Northern Cove. The lake was impossibly still again. Claire stood barefoot at the edge of the dock, the Guestbook locked in the glove compartment of her car. Last night had changed something, crossed a line. The fresh entry wasn't just ominous. It was impossible. She'd read every page the night before. That message, "You shouldn't have come back," hadn't been there, unless someone had come into the cabin. But nothing else had been disturbed. Her equipment was untouched. The doors were locked. Her recorder sat where she left it, still running in passive mode. She'd checked it as soon as she woke. There was a sound, a soft creak, maybe the floorboards, but then silence. And then a whisper, faint, indistinct, but clear enough to make her freeze. "She's close." Claire played it 3 times. There were no footsteps, no door creak, no breathing. Just that whispered sentence, low, almost inside the recorder, as if whoever said it had been very near, or inside her head. She copied the file, encrypted it, and uploaded it when she got to town for a weak Wi-Fi signal. She wasn't taking chances. Now she was heading to the place Len Walters mentioned, the Cove. North end of the lake. A bend in the shoreline with no rentals, no trails, no docks. Locals called it the Hollow. She marked it on her map and packed gear. Waterproof flashlight, hiking boots, field mic, handheld camera. The air was thick by mid-morning. Storms were forecasted, but the sky held nothing but dense, silent clouds. The trail narrowed as she reached the northern bend. Brambles pulled at her jeans, and branches snagged her hair. It wasn't maintained, not part of the tourist-friendly shoreline. At one point, she had to climb over a fallen log, nearly slipping into a shallow ravine. But then she saw it. The inlet. The hollow. It was hauntingly quiet. No bird song, no insect hum, just windless stillness, the kind that presses against your skin like a warning. The water in the cove was darker here, almost black. Algae clung to the rocks like wet velvet. There was no dock, no boats, just silence. Claire pulled out her recorder. July 5th, 11:24 a.m. Reached Northern Cove, site where caretaker Len Walters reported lights on the night of August 10th, 1994. No signs of recent human activity. Water appears unnaturally still. Ambient sound level, low. Not normal for summer woods. She paused the recording and took photos of the shoreline. She waded in briefly, boots submerged, water cool against her ankles. And then she saw it. Something was wedged under the roots of a fallen tree at the waterline. Claire moved closer, crouching. It looked like fabric. She used a stick to dislodge it, thick canvas, water-stained. She pulled gently and felt it give. It came loose with a wet slap against the shore. It was a backpack, old, zipper rusted, but intact. She hauled it out and dropped it on the grass, careful not to disturb anything else. Water trickled from its seams. The logo was faded, but readable. L.L. Bean. A common brand, especially in Maine. But this one had initials stitched into the back panel. L. E. Claire's breath caught. Laura Emmett. Hands trembling, she opened the bag. Inside were the remains of a spiral notebook, pages fused together by water and time. A broken pair of sunglasses, lip balm, and a small, damp wallet. She unzipped it, a Massachusetts ID, faded, warped, but the photo was still visible. Laura Emmett. Claire sat back hard on the grass, pulse roaring in her ears. It wasn't just theory anymore. It was real. Proof. Laura had been here, maybe died here, or maybe not. She took a long breath, trying to center herself. The backpack wasn't enough to answer everything, but it changed the game. She bagged it carefully in a dry sack and clipped her recorder back on. 12:06 p.m. Found what appears to be Laura Emmett's backpack in the Northern Cove. Contains wallet with ID, personal items. Significant deterioration suggests long-term water exposure. Location not searchable by vehicle or footpath. Suggests intentional concealment or panic-driven abandonment. She hesitated, then added, possible site of final moments. That night, back at the cabin, the wind finally came. It shook the trees and set the porch swing swaying violently. Rain hammered the windows in gusts. Thunder cracked above the lake. Claire sat at the dining table with the backpack laid out in a drying rack, each item documented, photographed, sealed. But her thoughts kept circling. Who left the message? What else had been taken from the guestbook, or added? She reviewed the recorder's whisper again. She's close. Male voice. Mid-register. Calm. She ran it through pitch analysis software, then voice signature matching. No public matches. It wasn't enough for identification. Not yet, but she had something else. The notebook from the backpack. The cover was warped, but the first few pages were legible. In Laura's handwriting. The last entry. Michael thinks I'm imagining things, but something's wrong here. Last night someone was outside the window, just standing there, watching. When I called out, they vanished. I thought I heard footsteps by the water. I wanted to leave today. He said I'm being paranoid. I'm not. I know what I saw. If you find this, we didn't leave. We were taken. Claire read it twice, then a third time. The pen had smeared near the end. It trailed off at the corner as if the page had been torn or yanked. Then nothing. She sat in silence, the wind battering the glass. The police had never searched this cove, never found the bag, never heard Laura's voice. But now, Claire had it. She stared out at the black lake. Then she hit record. Episode 2. Confirmed item: Laura Emmett's backpack. Location: The Hollow. Evidence of fear prior to disappearance. Surveillance, possibly multiple sightings. Recorded journal entry confirms suspicion of being watched. Emphatic line: "We didn't leave, we were taken." This changes everything. She paused. This case isn't cold. It's hidden. Later, after midnight. She set the recorder to passive mode again, then lay in bed, listening to the storm pass. The wind eventually died. The rain stopped. She drifted, uneasy. And then she heard it. Footsteps, software deliberate, just outside the cabin. She froze. The sound moved across the porch, then stopped. She reached out, slowly, turned off the bedside lamp, waited. Something brushed the guest book on the table. She heard it. A faint drag of leather across wood, then nothing. She didn't sleep again that night. July 6th, 2023. Location: Stillwater Lake, Maine, Stillwater Sheriff's Office. The building looked like it hadn't changed since 1985. Stillwater's Sheriff's Office sat behind the post office, tucked beneath a sagging roof and a sun-bleached American flag. A wooden sign out front read, "Protect and Serve, Established." 1957. Claire parked beside an old truck and stepped out, the leather guest book sealed in a plastic evidence bag in her backpack. She wasn't sure what she expected. Skepticism, maybe, but not indifference. Not the wall of polite silence she was about to hit. Inside, a single overhead fan spun lazily. The front desk was unmanned. She rang the bell twice before a woman appeared, middle-aged, in khakis and a Stillwater PD polo. "Can I help you? I'd like to speak to someone about a missing persons case." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Recent?" "No, 1994. Michael and Laura Emmett." The woman's expression didn't change. "That case is closed." Claire remained calm. "It was never solved." A pause. Then, "You a reporter?" "I'm an investigator. Independent podcast journalist." The woman sighed. "1 second." She disappeared into the back. Claire waited, already feeling the resistance. The air inside smelled like paper and dust. A corkboard near the entrance was cluttered with faded flyers. Lost pets, fireworks notices, a blood drive from last year. Eventually, a tall man in uniform stepped into the lobby. Gray crew cut, clean uniform, slow walk. His badge read, Deputy T. Marks. "You're the podcaster," he said, not asking. "Claire Rains. I'd like to speak about some new information regarding the Emmett case. You know how many people think they've cracked that case?" Marks smiled flatly. "Tons. We've heard everything. Alien abduction, witness protection, lovers' pact." "This isn't a theory," Claire said. "It's evidence." She pulled out her sealed dry bag and laid it gently on the counter. He looked at it, then at her. "What is it?" "Laura Emmett's backpack, found yesterday in a cove on the north side of Stillwater Lake. ID inside. A notebook, possibly her last written entry." He didn't reach for it. "You touch it?" "I used gloves. Documented everything. Photographed it before removal." Marks leaned against the counter. "Why didn't you bring this in immediately?" "I did, less than 24 hours after finding it." "And you expect us to reopen a closed case based on a moldy backpack? I expect you to examine physical evidence from a disappearance that was never solved." Mark sighed. "Look, I'm not saying you're wrong. But this case has been dormant almost 30 years. There's no forensic value left in that pack, not after all this time. Even if it's hers." Claire stared at him. "And the guest book entry?" she asked. "What entry?" She opened her notebook, flipped to the photo she'd printed that morning. "August 10th, 1994. We're not alone here. I found this in the guest book at the cabin. Last entry before they vanished. Then a blank gap until 1996. Marks finally picked up the photo. He studied it, squinting. "Handwriting looks off," he said. "Could be a prank." A prank from 1994? He said nothing. Claire leaned in, her voice low and calm. You never saw the Guestbook during the original investigation, did you? He hesitated. No. Because Len Walters never turned it in. Now Marks's gaze sharpened. You spoke to Walters? Claire nodded. He said he saw lights on the water the night they disappeared. Marks rubbed his chin. Look, I was a rookie back then. Barely did more than take statements. That case, it went away fast. The family lawyered up. There wasn't much pressure. People figured it was a tragic accident. One more mystery. And around here, people don't like digging up ghosts. Well, I do, Claire said. He looked at her for a long moment. I'll take the pack, he said eventually. We'll send it to the lab in Augusta. Don't expect much. She slid it across the counter. And the Guestbook? He asked. I still have it. Not giving that up until someone takes it seriously. Marks nodded. I'll make some calls. You staying long? A week. He smiled faintly. You'll want to be gone by then. Claire left feeling unsatisfied. The conversation hadn't been aggressive, just slow and deliberate, like moving through thick mud. There were walls built here, and not all of them were made of brick. Back at the cabin, she found the Guestbook where she'd hidden it, inside a sealed container under the floorboards. She pulled it out, laid it on the table, and flipped to the Emmett entry. Her blood went cold. The handwriting was different again, subtle but changed. The word calm now had a strange loop at the end, and the line, "We're not alone here," had shifted down the page. She pulled out the photo she'd taken yesterday, confirmed it. It had moved. And beneath it now, in pale ink she was sure had not been there before, was a new line. You won't leave either. Claire backed away from the table. This wasn't possible. The book had been sealed, untouched, hidden, unless someone was still getting in. That night she drove into town again, needing air, needing clarity. She stopped at the local diner, one of the few places still open. A bell jingled as she walked in. A few heads turned. One man at the counter, middle-aged, wiry, with dark eyes, watched her the entire time she ordered coffee. She sat near the window, tried to collect her thoughts. A minute later, the man approached her table. You're the one renting cabin 6, right? He said. Claire froze. Do I know you? He didn't smile. Name's Eddie. I used to do maintenance for the lake houses. Back in the 90s, she gestured to the seat. He didn't sit. You should know something, he said. They always say the Emmets were the first. They weren't. Claire's heart skipped. There was a family in '78, he continued. Just the wife and the kid disappeared. Husband couldn't remember a thing. Swore they went out on the lake, never came back, but no boats were taken. Nothing ever found. He looked around, then back at her. I fixed the window at cabin 6 the next day. There was blood in the window frame. Claire swallowed. You told anyone? I was told not to. By who? He stepped back. Doesn't matter now, but you keep looking into this. Be careful. Why? What's happening out there? He paused. Some places, they don't forget what was taken from them. Then he left. Claire returned to the cabin shaken. She locked every window, bolted the doors, set her recorder in passive mode, hid the Guestbook again, but sleep didn't come. At 3:13 a.m., she woke suddenly. No noise, no dream, just a feeling like something had changed. She stepped into the living room. The Guestbook was sitting on the dining table, wide open. New entry, fresh ink. She saw. She knows. We're waiting. Claire stepped back, bile rising in her throat. Outside, on the dock, something creaked. July 7th, 2023. Location, Stillwater Lake, cabin dock and interior. The morning air was heavier than usual, like the lake was holding its breath. Claire sat on the cabin floor with her laptop open, the night's recording imported and visualized in waveform. She hadn't slept, couldn't. The message in the guest book had been in her handwriting. Not a perfect match, but close enough to make her question her memory, her sanity, or both. She saw. She knows. We're waiting. The ink was still drying when she found it, and the guest book had been hidden again under the loose floorboard. She hadn't touched it. She hadn't moved it. And yet, there it was. She turned her attention to the audio. The recorder had been running all night. She scrolled back to 3:13 a.m., the moment she'd woken suddenly, and hit play. Silence. Then the creak of the dock outside, then footsteps. Soft, slow, steady. Claire leaned closer. She enhanced the audio levels, filtering out the background hiss, and that's when she heard it. A voice, low, whispering. She's not alone anymore. Her stomach turned. She played it again. The voice came from near the recorder's mic, almost as if it were inside the room. Another line followed, barely above a breath. The water remembers. Claire stared at the screen, a sense of vertigo spiraling in her chest. The time code was real. There were no gaps, no edits. Either someone had been inside the cabin with her, or she was losing time. She set the laptop aside and walked to the dock. The lake reflected a gunmetal sky. A storm was coming. She stepped onto the dock, scanning the planks. One creaked loudly when she walked over it, more than the others. She crouched and ran her fingers along the edge. Something about the wood felt loose. She pried it up. Beneath the plank, wrapped in plastic and nailed to the underside, was a flat metal box. Her breath caught. The wood around it had been sawed, then replaced. Carefully. Recently. She grabbed her multi-tool and unscrewed the rusted nails. The box came free with a groan. She opened it slowly. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Water-damaged, curling at the edges, but still visible. People. Standing on this dock, posed at the front of the cabin, smiling. Claire recognized some of them from the guest book entries. Each photo had a date written on the back. The last one chilled her to the bone. August 9th, 1994, Laura and Michael. The photo was taken from a distance, across the water, perhaps. The couple stood at the edge of the dock, arms around each other. They weren't smiling. Laura's face was turned slightly, like she'd just heard something. Michael looked straight at the camera, as if he'd known it was there. Claire laid the photos out on the table inside, snapping shots of each with her phone. She'd go back to town soon, maybe even leave altogether. But something kept her here. Something more than curiosity. She needed to understand what had happened here, not just to the Emmets, but to the others. If the man at the diner was right, there had been disappearances going back decades. She pulled up historical maps of Stillwater Lake on her laptop. Most were tourist guides, clean and polished. But one, scanned from a 1967 government archive, caught her eye. It showed a narrow peninsula jutting into the North Cove, marked Survey Zone C13. But in modern maps, it was gone. No peninsula. Just water. Claire compared the two. The landmass hadn't eroded. It had been intentionally erased. She cross-referenced geological records. In 1971, a small controlled flood had expanded the lake's footprint. No public warning had been given. No formal report followed. That peninsula, whatever had been there, was now underwater. She stared at the image. Survey Zone C13. Was that where the Emmets went? At dusk, Claire packed diving gear into a dry bag. She had a small GoPro, a waterproof recorder, and a heavy-duty flashlight. Her next stop would be the cove. Again. But deeper this time. She also packed the guest book. She wasn't leaving it behind again. As she zipped her bag, she noticed something odd on the last page. A faint circle drawn in pencil, almost invisible against the paper. Inside it, a short phrase. The door opens below. Below what? The lake? She stepped outside. The storm was moving in faster now, clouds thick and roiling. Wind skimmed the lake's surface. The trees bent slightly, groaning. Then, somewhere down the shoreline, a single light blinked, like a lantern. Claire narrowed her eyes. Another blink. Closer now. She should go back inside. Lock the door. Instead, she walked toward it. July 7th, 2023. Night location, Stillwater Lake. Submerged site, survey zone C13. Word count, 2,882. The lake was black beneath the moonlight, unmoving, as if it had thickened into glass. Claire stood knee-deep in the shallows of the hollow, headlamp strapped over her hair, wetsuit clinging to her body like a second skin. Her backpack sat on the rocks behind her, sealed with plastic and holding the GoPro, waterproof flashlight, and the Guestbook. Just in case. The wind had died. No bugs, no birds. Nothing. She slipped the mask over her face and clicked on the flashlight. Its beam barely cut through the darkness. The water here wasn't just deep, it was dense, cloudy with algae and sediment disturbed by decades of silence. She adjusted her breathing. Her recorder sat at the edge of the water, still running. Time, 9:12 p.m. Location, Survey Zone C13. Entering water for submerged site exploration. Visibility low. Primary objective, confirm presence of sunken landmass or man-made structure beneath lake surface, based on historical 1967 map and disappeared peninsula. Claire moved deeper. The water reached her chest, then her shoulders. She sank beneath the surface. The first few meters were uneventful. Thick sediment drifted in her light beam like tiny jellyfish. Fish darted past, silvery flashes in the dark. Then the lake bed dropped. A shelf. A sudden plunge into blackness. She followed it down slowly, equalizing her ears, flashlight cutting a narrow cone ahead of her. The GoPro on her shoulder recorded silently, a small red light blinking, and then, just beyond her beam, she saw it. Stone. Flat, angular, moss-covered. Too smooth for natural formation. She kicked closer and illuminated what looked like a foundation. Square edges. Overgrown, but undeniably man-made. Rebar jutted from one corner like twisted bones. Nearby, a submerged door frame leaned sideways, half buried in mud. She swept her light side to side. There were stairs. 5 stone steps descending into nothing, their lower half swallowed by silt. Something had been built here. Something big. Claire's lungs tightened, not from lack of air. From fear. She circled the structure once, filming everything. Something about the way the lake bed framed the ruins felt wrong. Unnatural. As if the water had formed around the building, not the other way around. Then her flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. She hit the casing. It steadied. But the GoPro's red light turned off. Claire looked up. Above her, maybe 10 meters up, something moved. A ripple. Then 2. She kicked hard for the surface. She broke through the water with a gasp, ripping the mask from her face. The lake was empty. No sounds, no lights, just the moon reflected in perfectly still water. She swam to shore fast, dragging herself onto the rocks and collapsing beside the recorder. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She waited. Nothing followed. No movement. But she knew what she saw. Inside the cabin an hour later, she downloaded the GoPro footage, wrapped in a blanket, shivering despite the summer air. She fast-forwarded through the dive, slowing only when she reached the moment her flashlight flickered. Frame by frame, she examined the murk. Then paused. Something moved across the frame. A shadow. Slender, almost human-shaped, hovering above the stone steps. She rewound, zoomed in, still blurry, but there. It moved differently than a fish. Too slow, too deliberate. Her heart slammed in her chest. She grabbed the Guestbook from her bag, flipped to the back page. Another entry had appeared. The door's open. It hadn't been there before. The pencil circle from earlier now had a line drawn from it, leading down the page like a path. At the very bottom, scribbled faintly, almost missed. She came back. So did we. Claire felt the air go thin. She tried to speak. Couldn't. She set the guestbook down and hit record again. July 7th, 11:16 p.m., underwater site confirmed. Submerged structure matches 1967 landmass survey. Possible foundation, man-made steps, metal framework. GoPro footage captured unknown moving figure, human-sized. Entry in guestbook appeared while I was away. Message reads, "The door is open." She paused. "I don't think this is a disappearance case anymore. I think this is a burial site." Claire didn't sleep. Again. Instead, she reread the entries in Laura Emmett's notebook, the one from the backpack. There were only a few legible pages, but one stood out now, more than ever. August 8th, 1994. Michael thinks I'm imagining things again. I told him about the dreams, the one where I'm underwater and I find a house. A whole house just sitting there beneath the lake. He said maybe I'm just projecting, that I'm anxious. But I saw something this morning. In the water. I think it was a woman. Pale, staring up at me. She didn't move. She just watched. I blinked and she was gone. Claire's fingers trembled as she held the page. A house under the water, a woman watching. She had seen it too. And that meant Laura wasn't imagining things, and she hadn't been alone. As dawn crept over the lake, pale and cold, Claire stood once more at the dock. The water impossibly calm, the reflections perfect. She stared down, and for a moment, just a blink, she saw a face staring back, not her own. July 8th, 2023. Location, Stillwater Lake, St. Elias Church and Town Record Vault. The church bells rang just once, soft, solitary, before the town fell silent again. St. Elias, Stillwater's only church, sat on a bluff overlooking the east side of the lake. Claire parked beneath a row of maples, the branches still dripping from last night's rain. She climbed the steps slowly, the stone steps worn smooth by decades of weather and footfall. Inside, the air was cool and dry. Candles flickered near the altar. A figure in a dark sweater knelt in the front pew, praying or simply resting. An elderly woman in black watched Claire from the vestibule. "You're not here for Mass," the woman said, not unkindly. "I'm looking for records, historical ones. Property deeds, local land surveys." The woman tilted her head. "You're staying at the lake, aren't you?" Claire didn't answer. She didn't have to. The woman turned away and opened a side door behind the pulpit. This way. The record vault beneath the church was a repurposed storage room. Rows of dusty filing cabinets, stacked ledgers, and wooden shelves. The air smelled like mold and parchment. Claire slipped on nitrile gloves and began sifting through a cabinet marked Land Acquisitions, 1950 to 1975. It didn't take long. Survey Zone C13 appeared in multiple folders. One from 1969 noted a planned acquisition of private land for environmental preservation and flood basin expansion. Beneath it, typed in faded carbon copy, were three names: the Arlen Estate Private Lot number 211, Rosemary Kinley, parcel number C13B, D&R Greaves. Claire frowned. She flipped to the next file. Most of the paperwork was standard. Release forms, valuations. But several pages were missing, ripped clean from the bindings. And then she saw it. A hand-drawn map. Pencil on vellum. It showed the peninsula clearly, marked with a large X across the estate. Someone had circled the Arlen name in red ink. Next to it, a handwritten note. "Do not register this title, not to appear in public record." Claire's pulse quickened. She dug deeper. A second folder, labeled Miscellaneous Complaints, 1971, contained a single incident report. June 12, 1971. Filed by E. Arlen, female 38. Family refuses to vacate despite pressure from officials. Claims of water rights infringement, unauthorized flooding, trespassing, and surveillance. Woman reports strange figures seen outside house at night. That was the last mention. No forwarding address, no sale record, no death certificate. The Arlen family had simply vanished. Claire stepped into the church's anteroom to breathe. The woman in black had returned, sitting by a stained glass window. "Did you know the Arlens?" Claire asked. The woman's eyes narrowed. "That name shouldn't still be spoken. Why?" "They didn't leave like the others." Claire felt the air shift. "What happened to them?" "They stayed," the woman said. "When the water came, they refused to move. Said the land belonged to their family for generations. They camped out, boarded the windows, thought they could wait it out. And one morning the house was gone, just gone. No debris, no furniture floating, nothing, like the lake swallowed it whole." Claire felt something cold crawl up her spine. "What did they say it was?" she asked quietly. "A landslide or flooding, depending on who you asked." "But what did you think it was?" The woman looked her dead in the eye. "I think the lake wanted to bury them." Claire left the church just before noon, clutching copies of the files. She drove into town, her hands tight on the wheel. At the town library, she pulled every article she could find from 1971. Nothing about the Arlens, not one mention. But there was something else. A newspaper from August 2nd, 1971, included a small obituary. Dennis Greaves, age 47, and Rosemary Kinley, age 62, presumed drowned following local flooding along North Bank. No remains recovered. Greaves and Kinley, two of the three names tied to Survey Zone C-13. Only the Arlens remained unaccounted for. Claire scribbled it all down, piecing the pattern together. C-13 wasn't just a geographic designation, it was a graveyard, a section of the lake that had been intentionally erased, its history covered by water and time. And someone, possibly multiple people, had gone to great lengths to make sure no one remembered. Until now. That night, back at the cabin, Claire laid the files across the table. 3 families, all tied to the same land, all vanished or presumed dead under vague circumstances. The Emmets had rented a property that sat on the water above that land, and now she was sleeping over it too. She opened the Guestbook again, hand trembling. Another entry, written with a precise, even hand, ink so dark it looked wet. "You opened the door. We are not the first. You will not be the last." Below it, a list of initials had appeared, scrawled in fading graphite, EARKDGMELE. Claire stared at them. Emmett, Kinley, Greaves, Arlen, and now hers. At the bottom, a new set of initials, CR. She recoiled. The book knew her. Or something did. She closed the book and backed away. Her hands shook. Every instinct screamed for her to leave. Drive to the nearest city. Mail the book to a lab. Dump the audio to the cloud. Wash her hands of it all. But she didn't move, because part of her knew the truth. The moment she found the backpack, there was no going back. At 2:07 a.m., her recorder picked up another whisper. She didn't hear it in the moment. But the mic did. "She's almost ready." July 9th, 2023. Location: Stillwater Lake, overgrown trail and ranger outpost. The map didn't show the trail. It was only thanks to a loose sheet from the 1967 survey records that Claire even noticed it. Faint lines scribbled in pencil between Survey Zone C-13 and the eastern ridge of the lake. Labeled only, "Access Path, Decommissioned." She found the trailhead behind a thicket of blackberry bushes near the hollow. The brush was overgrown. the soil packed hard from years of abandonment. Trees leaned inward, like they wanted to bury the path permanently. Claire ducked under a fallen branch and began walking. The woods swallowed her fast. Birdsong faded. Even the breeze seemed to stop. Time here felt sticky. Her watch ticked, but somehow the trail never shortened. She should have reached the ridge in under an hour, but after 2, her GPS still flickered at the same coordinates. She kept walking. Then, just before noon, she saw it. An old outpost, a ranger's shack, sunken into the earth, nearly choked by vines. One window was shattered, its glass long since buried in moss. A small sign swung on rusted hinges. Stillwater Forest Station, 3 Department of Conservation, established 1952. Claire approached slowly. The door was unlocked. Inside, dust coated everything. A lantern lay on the floor, its base cracked. A desk upturned. A field cot, collapsed and moldy. On the back wall, faded under layers of grime, was a map. The lake as it had looked in 1970. The peninsula still there. No water swallowing it yet. She stepped over a rotten floorboard and scanned the desk. Folders, reports, memos typed in courier font. She opened the first one. Incident report. July 19th, 1971. Subject: unexplained drowning. Child, 9 years old. Details: victim found with no signs of struggle, 4 miles from last known location. Eyes open, no water in lungs, no cause of death recorded. The next was worse. Incident report, August 2nd, 1971. Subject: missing hiker, R. Kinley. Details: never reached trail checkpoint, weather clear. Last seen on footpath near Survey C13. Notes: faint footprints leading back toward lake. No return path. Dozens more. Each case different, but linked by one thing. The lake always took something. Claire's fingers trembled as she reached for the last folder in the drawer. It was unlabeled. Inside was a single sheet. A drawing. A circle of figures standing around a submerged building. Lines arced from their hands down into the earth like roots. One word was written in large, shaky script across the center. Remember. Claire blinked, backing away slightly. Then she noticed the far wall of the outpost, carved deep into the wood, blackened by age and algae. He left me. I stayed. I drowned, and still I stayed. Oy. The water exploded as she broke through, gasping, the sky above now darkened by clouds. She dragged herself to the rocks, shivering uncontrollably. The recorder was still on. It had captured everything, and in the final seconds, one last whisper came through. Next time, she stays. Back inside the cabin, Claire collapsed on the floor, soaked and shaking. Her laptop glowed softly beside her. She uploaded the GoPro footage and froze on a single frame. It showed Laura standing at the bottom of the underwater stairs. But next to her was Claire, or someone who looked exactly like her, expressionless, waiting. She opened the guestbook one final time. The last page was filled. All entries written in the same hand, her hand. It called me. I answered. I saw. I know. The water remembers. The door is always open now. I will stay. Below it, the initials, CR, and below that, CR repeated, dozens of times, the ink still wet. Outside, the lake was rippling, but there was no wind. July 11th, 2023, location, Stillwater Lake, cabin interior, Claire's final recording. The voicemail came at 3:06 a.m. Claire had left her phone charging on the nightstand, silenced, thinking she'd finally passed out. But the buzzing had woken her. The number was unlisted. No caller ID. Just a 38-second message. She sat on the edge of the bed, listening. A man's voice, shaky, almost whispering. You don't know me, but my name's Jacob Emmett. Laura's brother. I heard your show. Heard your voice. You sound like her. Static crackled. They never looked past the surface. The lake, Stillwater. It didn't take them. It chose them. My sister didn't drown. The message skipped. Cut. You're marked now, like her. Then silence. No callback option. No voicemail ID, as if it hadn't come through any network at all. Claire stared at the phone. It was cold in her hand, though the cabin was stifling. She checked her call logs. Nothing. No incoming number. No saved voicemail. But the recording still played when she hit recent messages. It was there, and not there. She stepped outside to clear her head. The lake was still. Her car was parked exactly where she'd left it. Locked, sealed. She walked around it slowly, not expecting anything. But then she saw it. On the passenger seat, under the windshield. The Guestbook. She hadn't brought it out. She hadn't even taken it from under the floorboards. But now it was sitting there in plain view, its leather cover damp with dew. Claire unlocked the door and retrieved it. Opened to the final page. The ink had bled, the words warping. You are not outside. You are below. She snapped it shut and staggered back into the cabin. She set up her equipment, her voice recorder, her microphone, the Guestbook, Laura's notebook, the GoPro. She powered everything on and hit record. July 11th, 11:47 a.m. This is Claire Rains. If you're hearing this, I may not be here anymore. She paused, collected herself. Since arriving at Stillwater Lake, I've found multiple anomalies tied to the 1994 disappearance of Laura and Michael Emmett. Physical evidence, audio records, witness testimony, historical maps erased from the modern archive. There was a house and estate, submerged by artificial flooding. The Arlen estate, C13, still there, underwater, full structure intact. I've seen it. I unlocked it. And something, is still there. She glanced at the Guestbook. The book records names. It speaks, it moves, it tracks, and it marked me. Just like it marked Laura, and Kinley, and Greaves, and the Arlens. Maybe others. Voices whisper when I sleep. I've lost time. I've heard things no one else has, and last night I saw my reflection in the lake. She paused again. But it wasn't me. Silence. If I disappear, if this recording is all that's left, burn the book, destroy the pages. Don't take it. Don't read it. Don't stay at cabin 6. Don't go near the cove. Don't think about the house beneath the water. That's how it starts. She leaned closer to the mic. That's how it takes you. She uploaded the audio to her cloud drive, archived it 3 times, sent it to her producer, saved it to a flash drive. Then she sat back and listened. Her recorder was still running. And a voice, not hers, whispered into the mic. She hears us now. At 2:03 p.m., the wind picked up across the lake. The first real storm in days. Claire sat on the porch, watching the clouds gather like teeth in the sky. Thunder rolled. Leaves turned inside out. The cabin creaked under the sudden pressure drop. A single drop of rain hit the Guestbook beside her. It sizzled. She turned the page. New entry. 1 more to go. Below it, only 1 set of initials. CR. Claire stood up and walked to the edge of the dock. She stared into the water. Her reflection waited for her. And smiled. July 12th, 2023. Location, Stillwater Lake. Claire's last day. Claire packed before sunrise. She moved mechanically, folding clothes, sealing hard drives, carefully wrapping the Guestbook in canvas. She didn't know if she was truly leaving or just pretending to. Stillwater Lake had a way of making you uncertain of your own intentions. By 7:30 a.m., the sky had cleared. Birds were back. The dock looked innocent again. She loaded the Subaru and climbed into the driver's seat. Turned the key. Nothing. Not a cough. Not a whir. Not a light on the dash. She tried again. Silence. The battery was new, the tank full. The engine had been running fine since Brooklyn. She stared at the ignition for a long moment. Then she noticed something on the passenger seat. The guestbook was gone. She hadn't opened it since the previous day. Hadn't touched it this morning. She checked the back seat, the floor, the trunk. Gone. She walked back to the cabin, heart pounding. The porch creaked beneath her boots. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and froze. The guestbook sat on the dining table. Open, fresh ink still wet. Stay. She stepped back. The air inside the cabin had changed. Warmer, pressurized, like being inside a diving bell. Her recorder, which she hadn't touched since yesterday, clicked on by itself. Claire moved to it slowly. The playback started. July 13th, 6:43 a.m. This is Claire Rains. She blinked. Tomorrow's date. This will be my final recording. I know that now. The voice was hers, but distant, hollow. They offered me a choice, leave and forget, or stay and remember everything. I chose to stay. Claire backed away from the recorder. It kept playing. You'll come too, eventually. The lake calls all of us back. Then static. Then silence. She ran. Out the door. Down the path. Into the woods. Branches whipped her face. Her knees caught roots. Blood dripped from her shin. She didn't care. She needed distance. She needed out. She cleared the tree line and collapsed near the road, breathing hard, clutching her chest. And then she saw the notebook, Laura's notebook, resting in the gravel. She picked it up, slowly, like it might bite. Opened it. A new page. In Laura's handwriting, not just similar but identical. A message. Claire. Then beneath it, it remembers you. It always has. Claire dropped the notebook. She screamed. But the forest stayed silent. Back at the lake, the sky had darkened again. Clouds formed fast, boiling shapes with no origin. Claire stood on the porch, drenched in sweat and dread. She picked up her mic one final time. July 12th, 5:15 p.m., Claire Rains. If anyone finds this recording, I want you to understand what I did next. I've seen things I can't explain, heard voices I can't trace, found messages in my own handwriting I don't remember writing. I've lost time, lost sense, lost certainty, but not purpose. This lake is a lock. The book is the key, and someone has to stay to keep the door from staying open. It's not about ghosts. It's not about solving anything. It's about remembering. She paused. I choose to stay. Claire walked down to the dock, the guestbook in her hand, the key from the Arlen box around her neck. The lake waited, calm, patient. She stepped in, waded deeper, past her knees, her waist, her shoulders. She never looked back. At 7:41 p.m., her recorder captured one final whisper. She's home now, August 12th, 2023. Location, Stillwater Lake. 1 month later. The forest was alive again. Birdsong, crickets, the low rustle of wind through pine needles. Stillwater Lake shimmered under a cloudless sky, rippling gently like it had nothing to hide. No one had seen Claire Rains since July 12th. The Subaru still sat beside the cabin, dusty, undisturbed. A single pine cone rested on the hood. No sign of struggle. No broken windows, just absence. The only thing out of place was what the hiker found. His name was Derek Beals, 23, a summer intern for the Maine Wildlife Preservation Fund. He was cataloging invasive plant growth along the shoreline when he came across Cabin 6. He hadn't planned to approach it, but something caught his eye. On the porch, in plain sight, a laptop, open, undamaged, still powered on. Beside it, a small black voice recorder. He picked it up, hit play. This is Claire Rains, July 12th, 5:15 p.m. Her voice was calm. Confessional? Too calm. Derek stood frozen as the message played out. She spoke of whispers, of submerged houses, of being marked, of staying behind. He almost dropped it. Instead, he turned off the recorder, backed away, and called it in. Authorities arrived within the hour. Stillwater PD forestry agents, 2 detectives from Bangor. No signs of forced entry. No signs of Claire. Her belongings were still inside the cabin: backpack, recording gear, hard drives. Everything but the guestbook. It was gone. Her files were unencrypted, neatly organized. A folder on the desk top read, "The Rental Guestbook, Final Episode." Inside, audio, photos, transcriptions, labeled meticulously. A podcaster to the end. But her laptop had one more surprise. At exactly 12:01 a.m. that night, her final episode auto-posted across all podcast platforms. Pre-scheduled, clean edit, final audio. The Rental Guestbook, Episode 7, Below Stillwater. Published August 13th, 2023. If you're hearing this, I've gone further than I meant to, deeper. But maybe that's what this story needed. There's a house under the lake, a place forgotten by maps and people who were never meant to leave it. It remembers, it speaks, and it only opens for those who know the name. If you're thinking about visiting Stillwater, static, then a voice. Not Claire's, software female. Familiar, but wrong. You're already here. The episode cut off. Reviewers flooded the comments. Some claimed it was a hoax, a marketing stunt. Others insisted the voice was Claire, but altered somehow. Slowed, warped, like something speaking through her. The episode hit number 2 on national true crime charts within 48 hours. In Stillwater, the investigation quietly stopped after 2 weeks. No leads, no foul play. Just another case of a traveler wandering too far and too deep into the woods. Locals didn't talk about it, not on record. But a waitress at the diner, older, quiet, left a message on Claire's podcast inbox. "I told her not to stay there. Cabin 6 has been waiting for someone since '94, maybe longer, and she fit the shape." On August 22nd, an automatic reservation processed through the cabin's rental site. Name, H. Carr. Email, redacted dates, September 1st through 6th. Cabin requested, number 6, no photo, no credit card, just initials. The site owner claimed he never approved it, said the calendar had reset itself. When asked if he'd cancel the booking, he said nothing, just looked out over the lake and muttered, "Some people were never meant to leave." And beneath Stillwater Lake, somewhere beyond the visible shore, the door still waits, unlocked, open, patient. September 6th, 2023. Location, Stillwater Lake. Cabin number 6, voicemail playback. Voicemail transcription, "Hey Claire, it's Ethan. I know I shouldn't be calling. I heard the episode. I can't stop listening to it. It's not just the story, it's the silence in it. Like something's beneath everything you said. I'm coming up next week. I rented the place. Cabin 6. Just for a few nights. I want to understand. I want to hear it too. If you're still there, leave something for me. Anything. I'll know it's you. Beep."